Hey, what's going on, AP guys? We have a video for you today on bleeding Kansas, one of the causes of the Civil War and all sorts of chaos going on in Kansas in the 1850s. So let's get going. All right, let's go back a little bit to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was passed in 1854. And this was a law that allowed for popular sovereignty in the Kansas and Nebraska territories. So we see this word popular sovereignty. What that means is that the people living there in that territory could decide if they want slavery there or not. And this was devised by this guy, the little giant Stephen Douglas. He was a senator from Illinois. He defeated Abe Lincoln in the senator race in 1858. That's part of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. I do have a video for that, so please check the description below. And he also played an instrumental role in the Compromise of 1850 as well. So what does this Kansas-Nebraska Act mean? Well, the expectation was that Kansas would be a slave state and Nebraska would be a free state. And this overturned the Missouri Compromise of 1820 because that applied to the Louisiana Purchase territory, and it said that nothing above that 3630 line would be slave, and Kansas is above that 3630 line. Now, so many in the North are upset about this. They felt that the Missouri Compromise had worked well for the previous 34 years, and it should not have been overturned. And this helps lead to the creation of the Republican Party. So let's go to Lawrence, Kansas. This is a city in Kansas that is a free soil city. So a lot of people who are anti-slavery moved to Lawrence, Kansas. And what you see is a lot of people are going to move into Kansas to try to sway the election their way. This city is burned by pro-slavery individuals. It's called the Sack of Lawrence, and you can see here that this city is burned and kind of destroyed. People are cleaning up afterwards. This helped exhibit the tensions in Kansas over popular sovereignty and slavery. So let's go to this guy, Charles Sumner, and the caning of Charles Sumner. So who was Charles Sumner? Here's a picture of him. He was a senator from Massachusetts. Okay, so what does he have to do with bleeding Kansas? Well, he was an abolitionist, a very hardcore abolitionist who wanted to end slavery and certainly keep it from going into Kansas. And he gives a political speech in the Senate called The Crime Against Kansas. And in this speech, he criticizes Douglas for authoring the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and he also criticizes a senator from South Carolina named Butler. And he says some pretty harsh things about the institution of slavery and Butler himself. We're going to have this guy, Preston Brooks, come into the picture. And Preston Brooks is related to Butler. He is a relative of Butler. He is a member of the House of Representatives. He wanted to defend the honor of the South, of South Carolina, and of his relative Butler as well. So there's this caning, this event called the caning. Brooks attacked Sumner while Sumner was at his desk with a cane. The reason why Brooks has a cane is he was shot in the hip during a duel and had to walk with a walking cane the rest of his life. So he goes and he attacks Charles Sumner, beats him unconsciously, and continues to hit him in the head so hard that the top of his cane actually breaks off. And there were a few senators who wanted to try to break it up, but another senator had a gun pointed at them and said, let them be. So this was a staged attack. Sumner is knocked unconscious, and this helped show deep tensions in Congress between the North and the South. Brooks ends up resigning his seat and gets elected again in a special election. So South Carolina overwhelmingly votes him back in. So let's go to Pottawatomie Creek. John Brown, who becomes really famous a few years later from Harper's Ferry, and his sons, they plot revenge for the sack of Lawrence and the caning of Charles Sumner. So here's John Brown. About this time in the mid-1850s, he had a lot of kids. I'll be doing a video later on John Brown and Harper's Ferry. So he and his followers and his kids, they kill 5 pro-slavery individuals. They actually use their swords on them and they cut them into pieces, essentially. They brutally murdered these 5 people who are pro-slavery. Brown and his followers leave Kansas. They escape trial or being caught there, but he will, as I said, make a reappearance in Harper's Ferry in a few years. And the fighting in Kansas continues throughout the 1850s. So let's go to something called the Lecompton Constitution. This can be a little tricky. So Kansas is applying for statehood to the Union, and voters could vote for a constitution with or without slavery. This is the Lecompton Constitution. You could go in and you could vote, yes, we want slavery. No, we do not want slavery. Seems pretty straightforward. However, if enough voters, if more than half, if this popular sovereignty works and enough voters voted for the Constitution without slavery, those slaves that were already in Kansas could stay and be slaves. So it's really it's a sham election. It's a trick that would still allow slavery to exist, certainly for the ones who are already there. So the Freesoilers, the people who are anti-slavery, they refuse to vote. And even President Buchanan, the Democratic president who wants to try to avoid tension, supports the Lecompton Constitution. Ultimately, what happens is this fighting continues, and there's a couple more constitutions that are made for the state of Kansas. And Kansas does not become a state until early 1861, and they enter it as a free state because so many of the southern states had already seceded from the Union. So let's talk about the impact of bleeding Kansas. Well, the Democratic Party is split along sectional lines, and the Northern Democrats are going to continue to stick with Stephen Douglas. That should be 1S, not 2. And if we look at this map in the 1860 presidential election, this all but guarantees the Democrats would not win. So if you look here, we have Douglas in blue. He only wins the electoral votes in one state. However, he had the second most popular votes. So the Northern Democrats, those that vote Democrat, will vote for Stephen Douglas. Southern Democrats will vote for Breckinridge, John C. Breckinridge, who is a former vice president, and Abe Lincoln in red is going to win the election, even though in many states in the South he does not appear on the ballot whatsoever. So ultimately, Abe Lincoln will win this election, and he'll become the first Republican president, and civil war will begin shortly after. All right, thank you very much for watching. That's everything you need to know about bleeding Kansas. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Please help me spread the word about this video. If you know anybody who would benefit from this, please let them know. And also, if you found this video helpful, hit the like button below. And I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much, and have a good day, guys.